This video is sponsored by Heralds of Wayanar. I basically spend the whole video talking about them, so no need for any more information here. Let's get into the video. Hey everybody! So I want to get something out of the way before starting this video, and I want to do it as quickly as possible just to avoid it being a problem in the future.
Yeah, that's unlikely.
As you probably just saw, this is a sponsored video. And I try to handle sponsored videos with tact because frankly, I don't want to just shove products at you guys that I wouldn't legitimately use or believe in. But this isn't necessarily a product, it's a show. The creators of this show reached out to me and wanted me to talk about it because they want to gain exposure. But they want to gain exposure in the right way. They wanted to talk with people who actually cared about their brand, actually cared about what was going on. And so they asked if I would be willing to review this product with my own voice, my own terms, everything that I thought. And so before agreeing to this, I decided to go watch some of their episodes. And admittedly, I got hooked. So everything that I'm saying here is because I legitimately wanted to talk about it. Yes, they wanted to sponsor me, that's out of the way, but I genuinely am excited to talk about this, and I actually had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you all because I thought there was a lot to learn. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's talk about it. So topic for today, what is it that we're discussing? We're discussing character conflict, not player conflict, but character conflict.
You are wrong about what you think. Shedzog is not a destroyer.
What I am hearing is that you are the reason our party is riddled with arrows.
I am the reason that you are alive.
Specifically, how character conflict can be handled in a great and fascinating way without causing player conflict. Now, I've had some videos about this in the past, somewhat recently too. It's been something that I've been going over because it's the topic that just keeps coming up. It seems a lot of people are having problems with this at their table. And so when Brad and Russell, the individuals who are associated with this show, Heralds of Wayanar, who reached out to me, wanted to talk to me about this, and they asked what I would like to talk about, what I cared about in the show, I watched several episodes, and I very quickly narrowed in on something in particular. Their characters have a lot of conflict.
It's of the coming conflict.
In fact, they handle it so well that I realized that this might be a great case study in how to explain how to handle character conflict at your table. Let me get this out of the way because I know people are going to be a little bit snooty about it in the comments. People are going to say that this is a produced D&D show. Of course, they're not going to have player-to-player conflict, and yeah, I get that. In fact, the people over at Heralds of Wayanar have made absolutely no attempt to try and remove the fact that this is a produced show. It's exactly what they're trying to do. They understand that D&D is a very fascinating storytelling mechanic, and they want to try and use it in a much more produced and simplified way. An easier to watch thing than Critical Role or, Dimension 20, because those things are just so long. And that's okay. I don't think it's wrong of them to want to do that. I think it is a fascinating way to explore more D&D storytelling. But with that being said, I do think it is still something that you can absolutely learn because D&D at its core, as I've said time and time again on this channel, is an intimate experience. It is letting some of yourself out. It is acting. And you know what? The simple fact of the matter is, it is easy for those personal feelings to get related to in other forms of acting and media. Movies, plays, anything like that. So I don't think you can remove that as something that's important to think about. And so I do think this is an amazing case study and I want to get right into it.
Fucking went right into it.
Heralds of Wayanar is a very fascinating show because it has deep world building, deep characters, and honestly, some amazing production. I was actually kind of amazed because when I met with Russell and Brad, they actually asked me what tips I could give them on their production and their editing, as if mine was anything compared to them. I consider my editing very amateur, and I'm very happy with my current editor who helps me out with those things because I'm not that great at it. The fact of the matter is, I think theirs is fantastic, and so I was kind of amused that they wanted to ask me about that. But I think the show is very well produced, and I really enjoyed talking with these guys. But as I began to watch the show and learn more about it and see these characters, I saw these very in-depth characters who already had built-in conflict between them. They had things that they were immediately at each other's throats about, but they were forced to work together. It was necessary for them to be able to survive. In fact, the first several episodes are very tense because they are in a dire situation and have no choice but to continue to work with each other. And even still, those tensions begin to bubble and rise, and they begin to cause questions in the back of your mind. Why are they so intent against each other? What is so important that they have to fight about this in this moment? Why is there so much mistrust? And so I began to ask myself questions about that, and I reached out to Brad and Russell, and they were kind enough to give me an interview with Russell, who's the DM of the show, by the way, to talk about these things and inter-character conflict. Now, before I get into that interview, which I'm very excited to go into, let me talk about the moments that I consider to be, well, perfect examples of inter-character conflict. Take this, for example.
You have answered your own question. I am a son of Jair. I am from the village of Deha, the shadow of Mount Velkron, or I was, before it was taken from us.
And tell me, he said, his hand hovering over the hilt of his rapier, we all know that as Edward we are forever bound to worship the ancients, but what demigods do you serve?
I worship no heralds, no demigods, only the one true God, Shedzog.
Bono hears that you worship Shedzog, and from his experience in Okonesh has heard of the Shadow Riders and understands them to be an elite force, runs up as best he can, stumbling with his halberd to swing at you, misses, and just lands in, the halberd lands into the stone or dirt of the floor. And as I kind of crumple to the side, how can you worship that which would destroy us all?
That is exactly why I worship it and spread the knowledge. You are wrong about what you think. Shedzog is not a destroyer. He shall bring balance.
What I am hearing is that you are the reason our party is riddled with arrows.
I am the reason that you are alive.
Notice in there, did you see the way that they immediately jumped at each other's throats? And it wasn't just because of personal issues. There was a deep history there. When one character mentioned what happened in their backstory, immediately there was mistrust. It was clear that a Dark Rider was a serious issue. It was not something to be overlooked. A Dark Rider meant this character had done something horrible. And immediately there's a question in the back of your mind of what did he do? What was so horrible? But even more so, as a DM, I felt a little tense. I could see the characters at each other's throats and wondered, how are the players doing? But the players handled it all in stride. They did extremely well with handling it. But, like I said earlier, this is a produced show. A lot of the editing was done, so it's clear we missed some of what happened. So did they end up fighting? Well, the truth is, no. When I talked with Russell and discussed with him what was going on, I began to realize that there is a deep trust between the players, and I think it is an amazing way of handling conflict. But I really don't want to say too much more because I think Russell does an amazing job of outlining it. So let's go ahead and jump to him.
All right, I'm going to be cheeky and answer this question by answering a different question. And by that I mean that actually I don't really do much of anything to prevent conflict from the characters transferring into conflict between the players because I trust the players so much. We put an extremely extensive and rigorous process to vet people, not just for their ability to play D&D, but almost more importantly, I would say to me personally, much more importantly across the board, was that they exhibited traits that, one, showed that they had an extremely high level of personal character, and two, that they had an extremely high level of rapport with the rest of our group's culture.
So you'll notice as I was asking Russell these questions, one thing keeps coming up over and over again, his trust in his players. I've noticed that there's a very, very distinct thing that happens in the D&D community where everybody considers the Dungeon Master to be the babysitter. Let me make it very clear to all you overworked Dungeon Masters out there, it is not your job to handle your players.
It's not your problem, so don't let yourself be distracted.
I know that that seems like a weird thing to say, and it's become a very common thing to expect from Dungeon Masters, but you're not there to handle them. You're there to guide them. You're there to give them a world, a fun thing to play. If it becomes the point where you're having to babysit between them, you are not supposed to do that. It is the job of the players, and I know this is a hot take, but it is the job of the players to avoid conflict. I truly believe that. I do, because they should be able to be adults enough to be able to handle that between themselves. Now, if you're playing with a bunch of high schoolers, okay, it's going to be a different story, because obviously they're still developing. But if you're playing with a consenting group of adults, they should be able to handle the conflict between them. It should not be the Dungeon Master's fault. Now, if something happens where conflict does begin to arise, the Dungeon Master should step in to set rulings. They should be there to help mediate, but it should be between the two people to handle their own conflict. If they can't do that, I'm sorry, maybe they shouldn't be in the same group together, because this is an exercise in trust. And you could see that in the Heralds of Way in our show. You could see the trust between the players, especially in the way that Russell describes them and talks about them.
The rest of the team's chemistry and meshed with them exceptionally well. And so because of these things, I would say that I'm always on the alert for if that instance arose, but I'm very proud to say that that isn't really something that I have to be worried about, just something that I pay attention to, because it hasn't really arisen because I trust my players considerably and they have great chemistry and communication skills and a lot of personal character.
You could see very clearly that he cares a lot about them and he understands and respects them. Now, they did a lot of vetting between these players, and that's totally understandable. I personally think you should vet anybody you play D&D with. Make sure they're not going to be a problem. Make sure that everybody jives with each other. But you could see how well Russell respects what they're going to do. He respects that they're going to be able to handle it, and if something happens where you do need to mediate it, which will happen, as he states here.
But I'm extremely proud of the fact that the team all act and behave in a very mature way, and that we can communicate as adults and work through all these things, and we understand that there's no such thing as human interaction that is free of conflict. Conflicts naturally arise, and that's okay. But the difference between a good, healthy, professional or personal relationship is the ability to communicate and work through those things.
I think that is just an amazing way of putting it. Conflict will absolutely happen. But as you could see that conflict happens and he understands it will happen, they all expect each other to mediate it between themselves. But that's fine. That's good. It's a lot of fun. I loved watching it, but let's slow down a little bit. How did he set up the character conflict to create interesting stories? Because that's the other thing I haven't touched on yet that I really want to. Stories have to have conflict. Conflict is important. Without conflict, there's not stakes. I've said that many times in my videos. And so if you sit here and you watch them, you realize that in order to have a character-focused story, which a lot of D&D tables want, you have to have inter-party conflict. You have to have conflict between the characters. But how do you handle that in a proper way? And how do you set it up to be interesting? Well, I'll be honest, I learned a lot from Russell here, so just hear him out.
Okay, so when it comes to preparing our players for conflict, and prepare is the correct word because we want them to have conflict. We set them up to have conflict. The number one way that I do that is I lie to them a lot about everything. What does that mean exactly? So we have a very extensive character creation process, and after they pick where they are from in the world, because we have them consume like some basic general knowledge about all the places in the world that everybody would know, and then when they pick a place that resonates with them that they want to be from, then I proceed to lie to them like they would if they had grown up there. So the things about politics, propaganda, religion, culture, all of the different things that they would have learned and experienced, a different form of history. All of that is what they learn about the world. That's what I tell them. That's the background that they get. They learn the world from the perspective of where their character is from. And so naturally what that means is when the players get together, I don't have to work hard or push them or set them up or anything to get them to have conflict. They just naturally have conflict because their characters believe different things about the world. They believe different things about who's right and wrong in a different side of a conflict. They have different philosophical and religious and political beliefs and personal beliefs and cultural beliefs, and so those just naturally clash, and it makes them feel real and three-dimensional, like actual people who, don't get along and just show up in a group of eclectic people. No shade on anyone else or any other's process, but I love the rich diversity of human interaction when it comes to interpersonal conflict, and we really want to be able to put that on full display.
I really can't say it any better than that. The way that he set it up, the way he understood that the world does not understand each other, the way that he set up conflict in a realistic manner, I'm sorry, I can't really say it any better than that. I think it's amazing, and I will absolutely be taking what he taught me here. I think it is an amazing way of looking at it and also understanding how conflict happens in the world. I really think there's a lot to learn from this show, and frankly, I'm kind of invested in the characters at this point. Now, I don't have a ton of time to watch it, but at least it's not as long as Critical Role. I'm still catching up on it, but I am very excited to see where they go next, and I think that they're all amazing people. I honestly hope to be able to work with them more, and I'm very excited to bring the show to you guys. So I hope that you can enjoy and learn from this and go out in the world, be better people, and learn to be able to handle that conflict at your table. So go out into the world and make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and of course, never forget to play your role. A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. Big D the Cool Guy, BKBW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Sassy Cat Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Talia Martin, Tenai, Void Mystic, and Volpe Nico. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.